Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, September 25th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Spain and Italy send warships to assist the Gaza flotilla. So, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez announced on Wednesday that Spain will join Italy in sending a military warship to help the global Sumud flotilla, which is attempting to deliver aid to starving Palestinians in the besieged Gaza Strip and came under drone attack following threats from the Israeli Foreign Ministry. So, this is what the global Sumud flotilla said on Wednesday. This is their statement on the attacks that hit their boats. The group said, quote, "Last night, multiple civilian boats were targeted by unmanned drones. The attacks included the deployment of explosive and incendiary devices, deliberate dispersal of chemical substances onto civilian vessels, disabling of emergency communication devices, and calculated physical damage designed to render the ships unseaworthy and endanger volunteers aboard," end quote. So the group added that all of its crew remains safe. According to a flotilla tracker, the flotilla consists of 52 boats, and the majority of them are currently right off the coast of Crete. It looks like they're probably anchored there, right off Crete. And two boats previously came under drone attack when they were in Tunisia. So being in port does not necessarily mean that they are safe from attack. So Italy was the first country to announce that it was deploying a warship to aid the flotilla, citing the presence of Italian citizens on the boats. So Italian Defense Minister Guido Crosetto said that to ensure assistance to the Italian citizens on the flotilla, that he authorized the immediate intervention of the Italian Navy's multi-purpose frigate Fasan. So they're saying they're going there in case there needs to be a rescue operation, potentially to protect them if other drones attack. But to be clear, this does not, they're not saying they're going to escort these boats to Gaza. So Sanchez, the Spanish Prime Minister, he announced his plans to deploy a warship while attending the UN General Assembly in New York. He said, quote, "The government of Spain insists that international law be respected and that the right of our citizens should be respected to sail through the Mediterranean in safe conditions. Tomorrow we will dispatch a naval vessel from Cartagena with all necessary resources in case it was necessary to assist the flotilla and carry out a rescue operation," end quote. So again, they're essentially saying, they're going to be there in case something goes down. According to Ann Wright, who's a retired U.S. Army colonel, a very well-known legendary peace activist. She's a member of Code Pink and Veterans for Peace and other groups as well. But we published a thing from her on the blog that listed a lot of useful information about the flotilla. And one thing that she listed there was the names of the Americans who are on these boats. There's at least 22 American citizens, including six military veterans who are on these boats. So far, the U.S. government has stayed quiet about the Israeli attacks on the flotilla boats, despite the presence of U.S. citizens. I'll see if I can get a statement out of the State Department. The Sumud flotilla marks the fourth attempt to break Israel's starvation blockade on Gaza this year, but the first time that multiple vessels are involved. So we'll see what happens. They're saying that they're expected to reach Gaza within 4 days. Right now, it seems like they're taking a little break near Crete, and regrouping after the attack. But we will see what happens. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes and gunfire kill 84 more Palestinians in Gaza. So the slaughter continues. Israeli strikes and gunfire across the Gaza Strip killed at least 84 Palestinians on Wednesday, medical sources told the Palestinian news agency Wafa. The IDF continues its assault on Gaza City, where it aims to forcibly displace the entire civilian population and raze every building to the ground. But it also continues to launch attacks in central and southern Gaza, despite telling Palestinians to flee there. Al Jazeera reported that an Israeli strike hit a stadium in the Nusret refugee camp in central Gaza that has been turned into a shelter for displaced Palestinians, killing 12 people, including 7 women and 2 children. This picture here is of a young girl who was wounded by an Israeli attack. According to the photo agency, she was wounded while during an Israeli attack on Palestinians waiting for humanitarian aid. So Al Jazeera reporter Hind Kudari said, quote, despite these endless evacuation orders from Israeli forces telling Palestinians to leave Gaza City for the central and southern areas of the Strip, they're still being targeted wherever they go, end quote. Wafa reported that 3 Palestinians were killed while waiting for humanitarian aid northwest of Rafah, southern Gaza. Among the 3 killed was Mohammed al-Satari, a 36-year-old soccer player who previously played for the Shabab Rafah Sports Club. A lot of athletes, Palestinian athletes, have been killed. In Gaza City, medics told Reuters that at least 20 Palestinians were killed by Israeli strikes on a shelter housing displaced people near a market in the center of the city. One of the attacks, so I think this was on Tuesday, Israel bombed a building, and there was a woman there who used to teach at the Catholic school in Gaza. I saw this Khalil Saeg, who's a Palestinian from Gaza. He's not living there now, but I interviewed him last year, but he posted about it on X. So, everybody thought she was dead, but then apparently from under the rubble, she contacted somebody and said she was still alive. But rescue workers couldn't get there because of Israeli attacks, and then eventually they declared, that she must be dead. They still have not gotten to her. But I mean, imagine the horror of that. Being in a building that gets blown up and collapses on you, and you're still alive under the rubble, that you can make a call, and your children could be right next to you alive. I mean, it's just, I can't imagine like a worse way to go here. And think about how many people this has happened to, and young children and everything. Anyway, so Gaza's health ministry, where was I here? This is just a quote from the survivor of the attack that killed 20 Palestinians in Gaza City, Sami Hajjaj, who said, quote, we were sleeping in God's care. There was nothing. They did not inform us or not even give us a sign. It was a surprise. There are children and women, around 200 people, maybe 6-7 families. This square is full of families, end quote. All right, so the next one here, Trump tells Muslim leaders that he won't allow West Bank annexation. So President Trump met with a group of Arab and Muslim leaders on the sideline of the UN General Assembly on Wednesday and reportedly told them that he would not allow Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to annex the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The Muslim and Arab leaders have reasons to doubt. I mean, I think I might have understated this a bit for the article, but they certainly have reasons to doubt Trump. He has completely blown his diplomatic credibility, especially with the war on Iran, which was launched under the cover of airstrikes. As Israeli planes were in the air on their way to bomb Iran, he put out a tweet, or a truth, whatever you call it, on Truth Social that said, that he's committed to diplomacy with Iran as Israel was going to bomb them. There was also the deal with Hamas. They released Edon Alexander, the Israeli American IDF soldier who was captured on October 7th. Hamas basically released him as a goodwill gesture. The U.S. said that they were going to put the screws on Israel and try to get them to let aid in, and they did none of that. And then, of course, the recent attack on Qatar. Trump is claiming he didn't know about it, which I just do not believe. And then there's Israeli reports that say Netanyahu actually called them up and told them, and Trump did not oppose it. So the idea that they're going to, again, they have just plenty of reasons not to trust Trump here. So again, he's saying that he's not going to let Israel annex the West Bank. We've seen comments from Mike Huckabee, Marco Rubio, essentially saying that the U.S. wouldn't stop them if they went to do it. The other reason not to trust Trump is that guess who's visiting the White House after the General Assembly to get a private audience with him, Benjamin Netanyahu. So I'm sure he'll be singing a different tune in that meeting than here. And also, Steve Witkoff attended the meeting and said that there was apparently they presented some kind of Gaza ceasefire proposal to the Arab and Muslim leaders who attended this event, which is basically this proposal that was put forward under the Biden administration, that the obstacle to it is Israel. And Witkoff said, there's going to be a breakthrough soon, I think, on the ceasefire. But I just don't think there's any reason to believe that either, or to believe Witkoff. And there's a source speaking of Haaretz that said that, what was the quote? A Gaza ceasefire deal was nowhere close to fruition, despite Witkoff's comments. They're just trying to placate these Arab and Muslim leaders, and it seems like, at least some of them are still falling for it. All right, so the next one here, Spain imposes total arms embargo on Israel. This one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So in an effort to pressure Israel over the genocide in Gaza, Spain imposed a total arms embargo on Israel and barred imports from West Bank settlements. The Spanish government adopted the measures on Tuesday. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said the goal was to halt the genocide in Gaza. Spain's economy minister Carlos Cuerpo explained, quote, "This decree is a big step forward and is pioneering at the international level when it comes to a total arms embargo on Israel," end quote. So, Spain is a small player when it comes to arms exports to Israel, but there was some trade there. Since October 7th, 2023, Spain has sold $6.2 million. That's million with an M in weapons to Israel, which, of course, relatively small here, but good to see a European country cutting off the weapons. Something I saw Max Blumenthal say, he was on Dave Smith's show recently, and Dave asked him about, the UK recognizing a Palestinian state. And basically he said, this doesn't do anything. What the Europeans should be doing is pressuring Germany, which is a major arms supplier of Israel, to completely cut everything off. MERS said at one point that they were going to stop exporting things that Israel could use in Gaza, but who knows if they've even done that. But anyway, hopefully we see more European countries go with the total arms embargo. All right, so the next one here, Yemeni drone strikes Israel, 20 wounded. So the Israeli military said on Wednesday that a drone launched from Yemen struck the Israeli city of Eilat, and more than 20 people have been reported wounded. The Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, took credit for the attack later in the day. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saree said Yemeni forces fired a total of 2 drones at Israel and said that the attack achieved its goal. The Houthis have vowed that their drone and missile attacks on Israel will continue until there's a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the Israeli blockade on the territory. Wednesday's attack marks a rare instance of a Yemeni drone making it through Israel's air defenses. The Israeli military said that 2 Iron Dome interceptors were fired at the drone and acknowledged the failure to shoot it down. Footage from social media shows the drone making an impact near a hotel in a shopping area. The attack comes as Israel has significantly ramped up its airstrikes on Yemen. On September 10th, Israeli strikes pounded 2 newspaper offices in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, killing at least 31 people, marking the worst massacre of journalists since 2009, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. And we see Katz, the Israeli defense minister, he's threatening, saying that they're going to escalate attacks, and because the drone got through and wounded some Israelis, I do expect to see another major round of Israeli airstrikes on Yemen, but hasn't stopped the Houthis. It didn't stop them when the U.S. was doing it every day for about a month and a half. So it goes on. All right, so the next one here, Israeli drone crashes into UNIFIL Peacekeeper HQ in Lebanon. So this one's from Jason Ditz. So the headquarters of the UN Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, the UNIFIL peacekeepers in southern Lebanon, was struck yesterday when an Israeli surveillance drone crashed into the building. There were no casualties, according to UNIFIL, but the IDF has confirmed that the device belonged to them. They didn't provide any information about it. Essentially, again, it was a surveillance drone that crashed into the UNIFIL base, and we've seen, since over the past 2 years or so, the Israel firing on these UNIFIL peacekeepers, and we know that they do want them gone. They've been very out in the open about that. And a UNIFIL spokesperson said that the incident amounted to both a violation of UN Resolution 1701 and Lebanese sovereignty, and of course the ceasefire deal that they signed in Lebanon with Lebanon and Hezbollah back in November 2024. All right, so the next one here, Syrian President Sharaa says, "We are scared of Israel." So this one's from Jason again. So we've seen all these reports of progress between Israel and Syria on a so-called security deal. And now Sharaa, the former al-Qaeda leader who is the de facto president of Syria, he has dismissed the idea that Syria poses any threat to Israel, saying, quote, "We are not the ones creating problems for Israel. We are scared of Israel, not the other way around," end quote. At the UN General Assembly, he delivered remarks and faulted Israeli strikes as contradicting the international position on supporting Syria. He further said that Syria remains committed to the 1974 disengagement of forces agreement. Israel has repeatedly suggested that Shara's Islamist government poses a threat, even though they helped put them in power. But we've seen no attacks, and HTS has been very deferential toward Israel. They haven't launched any sort of attack or attempt at an attack against Israel or Israeli troops occupying southwestern Syria. Trump did meet with Sharaa. I just saw this, the news kind of came out not too long ago, so I'll probably write up a story on it tomorrow. But Trump meeting with the former al-Qaeda leader in New York City while preventing the Palestinian Authority leader from traveling to New York at the behest of Israel. All right, so the next one here, Pezeshkian says Iran will not seek a nuclear weapon. So addressing the UN General Assembly in New York on Wednesday, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian vowed that Iran would never seek a nuclear weapon, citing a religious edict or fatwa from Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that prohibits the development of weapons of mass destruction. So I know I had a similar story about this yesterday. Khamenei basically said the same thing himself, but this is the address to the UN from the Iranian president. He said, quote, "I hereby declare once before this assembly that Iran has never sought and will never seek to build a nuclear bomb. We do not seek nuclear weapons. This is our belief based on the edict issued by the supreme leader and religious authorities," end quote. So Khamenei made similar remarks a day earlier, pledging that Iran wouldn't seek nuclear weapons, but maintaining that Tehran would not give up its civilian nuclear enrichment program. His comments came a day after a group of Iranian MPs called for a reevaluation of the ban on nuclear weapons in the wake of the U.S.-Israeli war on the Islamic Republic. So in his speech at the UN, Pezeshkian, I always feel like I pronounce that wrong, but the Iranian president strongly condemned the Israeli and U.S. airstrikes on Iran, calling it a grave betrayal of diplomacy since the war was launched under the cover of negotiations. Israel launched the first round of airstrikes on June 13th, 2 days before Washington and Tehran were set to hold another round of talks. The code name for that initial round of airstrikes was the Red Wedding, and if there's any Game of Thrones fans out there, I just cannot imagine ever thinking that I would want to be affiliated with doing something similar to the Red Wedding. But that's just me. So this is Pezeshkian. He said at the UN, quote, "It is a black record of slaughter carried out by Israel in our country against our people, including women, children, and youth, under the name of preserving peace and security in the region. Assassination of state officials, systematic targeting of journalists, and the killing of individuals solely because of their knowledge and expertise are flagrant violations of human rights and international law," end quote. The Iranian president also criticized France, the UK, and Germany for taking the step to trigger the snapback sanctions mechanism under the 2015 nuclear deal known as the JCPOA. UN Security Council sanctions are now set to be reimposed on Iran on September 27th. Pezeshkian called the European move to trigger the sanctions illegal and said that it was carried out at the order of the United States. Iran's position is that they do not have the right to impose the sanctions since the U.S. was the party that unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018. All right, so the next one here, Washington escalates pressure on Iraq to detach from Iran. This article's from the Cradle. I haven't been covering really much happening in Iraq lately, but the U.S. has escalated its pressure on Iraq to disengage from Iran in recent weeks. Senior Iraqi officials were cited as saying by Al-Arabi al-Jadid on September 24th. This is what the sources said, quote, "These measures go beyond the issue of armed factions and their advanced weaponry and include reforms to the judiciary and financial sectors to ensure greater independence from the influence of groups allied with Iran," end quote. One official said Washington has also demanded legal action against the leaders of Iraqi resistance groups. No specific names were given, yet Washington has sanctions imposed on a number of resistance leaders, including Qais al-Khazali of the Asaib al-Ahaq movement. The pressure includes the banking sector, where public and private banks have been subjected to a U.S. oversight mechanism aimed at preventing Iran from exploiting the Iraqi financial system. An Iraqi diplomat said, quote, The Iraqi financial sector, both public and private, is now under near total oversight by the U.S. Treasury to ensure that Iran or its affiliates do not benefit from the Iraqi financial system. All financial transfers from Iraq abroad pass through intermediary banks in Jordan and the UAE as part of current U.S. oversight measures, end quote. So this is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. You know, everybody thinks the Iraq war is over. Yeah, the U.S. has a couple thousand troops there, but there's not really much happening. When there is military action, the U.S. is working with the Iraqi government against ISIS. But the U.S. has the country of Iraq basically held hostage because they control their money. They control their money supply. They can destroy the Iraqi currency. The U.S. Federal Reserve basically has all of Iraq's like offshore reserves. And that's why there's been like anti-Fed protests in Baghdad. And I remember seeing some pictures from them, and I posted it and said, you know, American libertarians have more in common with Iraqis than they might think. But it's just something people don't get, and that the U.S. still has all this control, power really to just destroy their economy, even though they're right next to Iran. All right, so the next one here, Trump is aware of Ukrainian counteroffensive plans. So the Wall Street Journal reported on Wednesday that President Trump was made aware of a planned Ukrainian counteroffensive that requires U.S. intelligence support before he posted a long statement on Truth Social where he insisted that Ukraine could retake all of the territory Russia has captured since 2022 and may even be able to go further. U.S. officials told the Journal that the president made the post after spending time with his special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, and Mike Waltz, his former national security advisor who now serves as the U.S. ambassador to the UN. I forgot about Mike Waltz. He got canned and moved over to the UN. I think yesterday when I covered Trump's big post on Truth Social, I said, this sounds a lot like something Keith Kellogg would say. And it seems like he's taking his advice. Kellogg is the one who recently said the U.S. could kick Russia's ass and is insisting that Ukraine could win the war despite Russia's continued gains in eastern Ukraine and its clear advantage with manpower and industrial capacity. So again, the headline here I think is important, that basically Trump's aware of a Ukrainian counteroffensive plan that will require U.S. intelligence support. In Trump's post, he kind of makes it seem like, he closed it saying, oh, we're going to continue providing weapons to NATO. They could do whatever they want with them. Everybody, good luck to you. We're out. But Ukraine relies on U.S. intelligence. And, of course, he's still shipping all the weapons Biden sent over and every Biden approved before he left. So this idea that, he's trying to portray like the U.S. is not involved, that's just not true at all. So let's see what else here. So U.S. officials said that Trump issued the statement in part to pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin to make a deal since there has been little progress since last month's Alaska summit. But Putin and other Russian officials have made clear they're prepared to continue the war until Ukraine agrees to their terms, and the Kremlin has brushed off Trump's comments. Peskov said, quote, this is the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. He said, quote, the fact that Ukraine is being encouraged in every way to continue hostilities and the idea that Ukraine can win something back is, in our view, a mistake. The situation on the front lines speaks for itself, end quote. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, met with Marco Rubio at the General Assembly. I don't think much really came of the talks, but at least they're talking. Actually I did Matt Gaetz's show again today, the former congressman who has a show on OAN to talk about Ukraine. Essentially what I said is this is the Biden doctrine, like sending, and Zelensky addressed the UN General Assembly, and essentially his message was, we need more weapons. Everybody give us weapons. And so the strategy is send more weapons, try to add some more sanctions on Russia, do another counteroffensive, which, this is just what has been going on for the past 3 years, basically. And, there's been no success in this strategy, and it's just grinding on, and people are still being killed every single day. All right, so the next one here, the last story, the U.S. bombs Somalia for the 79th time this year. So U.S. Africa Command said in a press release on Wednesday that its forces launched an airstrike in Somalia on September 21st that targeted the ISIS affiliate in the northeastern Puntland region as the Trump administration continues its heavy air campaign in the country, which has gained virtually no U.S. media coverage. The command offered no further details about the strike except that it was launched in the Golis Mountains, approximately 37 miles southeast of the Gulf of Aden port city of Bosaso. The same day as the strike, U.S.-backed Puntland forces said that the U.S. had launched a total of 2 airstrikes in the area. They said that the strikes targeted fleeing ISIS terrorists who were hiding. They didn't say how many casualties there were, but so they said the U.S. launched 2 airstrikes. AFRICOM's press release described it as a singular airstrike. I asked AFRICOM to clarify if they could give me a fresh count of how many airstrikes they've launched in Somalia this year. Usually when I ask them that, they get back to me. So I'll probably have that for you tomorrow. But just counting this as 1 airstrike, this brings the total number of U.S. airstrikes in Somalia this year to 79. Is that a high number? I think it is, but yet nobody on Earth, nobody in the U.S. is aware of this. And I mean, Trump has shattered the record, which he set himself back in 2019 at 63. Now we're at 79. And I know maybe these numbers are kind of arbitrary, but I think it's a way to grab people's attention. Like the headline, the U.S. bombs Somalia for the 79th time this year. If you weren't even aware of a drone war in Somalia, you see that headline, that might grab your attention, or at least I hope it does. But so the last Somalia airstrike confirmed by AFRICOM was launched on September 13th in Somalia's northern Sanaag region, which is to the northeast of Puntland. AFRICOM claimed without providing evidence that it targeted an al-Shabaab weapons dealer, but locals and clan leaders say that the man who was killed was a prominent clan elder who had no affiliation with al-Shabaab and was working for peace in the region. So people are outraged by his killing. I'm going to follow up more on that story. And this is an area where the U.S. usually doesn't launch airstrikes, where he was killed. And based on Somali media reports, the U.S. has probably launched more airstrikes in Somalia this week. There's been battles against al-Shabaab in central and southern Somalia. Usually AFRICOM confirms the airstrikes a few days later, but we're always going to stay on top of the U.S. air war in Somalia at antiwar.com, even though nobody else is. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Dan Steinbach, Real Estate Bonanza, the macabre U.S. plan for the post-genocide Gaza. One from Ted Galen Carpenter, Moldova, the next front in the West's confrontation with Russia. One from Trevor Burrus, the truth is there are no legal limits on an American president's war-making. One from Andrew Day, America's forever enemies want peace. Our spotlight from Connor Eccles, how a little-known embassy aide hijacked U.S.-Israel policy. So please go check all that out. Lots of stuff over in the blog as well. And in the lower part of the page, always a lot of content on antiwar.com. But that is it for today. What's today? So we have one more show this week after this. So like and subscribe, comment, all that stuff I always tell you to do. Again, I appreciate everyone who helped with our fundraiser. Happy that we're done with that. So thank you again. I think that is all. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Pray for peace, and thanks for listening.